You are listening to My Little Narcissist podcast. I'm your host, Lyra Stone, and I'm here today to chat with you about various methods and forms of self-healing you can do to kind of break free from the trauma bond, the pain, the ordeal that happened when you escaped abuse in an abusive relationship in various forms and whatnot. My purpose of the show is not really so much to talk about the psychology of the abuser himself or herself. I know that there is a lot of focus that is paid to kind of narcissistic persons, a lot of kind of dark, almost obsessive focus on why they behaved the way they did, why they thought the way they did, how they were able to do what they did. And I, of course, when I was going through my recovery, am still, I should say, going through my recovery. I don't want to falsely present myself as a healed person because I am very much far from it. But as I was first escaping an abusive relationship, I definitely kind of did a nosedive into kind of the psychological quandaries of who he was, how he could do what he was doing, because, you know, that can be a very necessary step in your path. Lord knows, coming out of abuse can be very scary and confusing because, you know, what needs to be emphasized about being a survivor of abuse is that abusers do not act like normal people do. And that might seem obvious to some. Of course, they're not acting like normal people. But when you start out in an abusive relationship, typically they do. Typically, there's not going to be any serious, red flags at first. They could be very normal, very amiable, very relaxed, very charismatic, very smart. Mine, he was kind of helpless in some ways. You know, he was more of your kind of covert variety of narcissism, if you want to put it in that spectrum. You know, he was very vulnerable. He was very kind of like needy. He had a very huge reliance on me when I first met him, a lot of admiration kind of for me. And, that's, of course, flattering. You feel kind of, I don't know, I instantly felt sort of a bond with him, a desire to help him, to encourage him. And, for a long time there, it was a very beautiful, in some ways, relationship, because I really liked encouraging him and making him feel smart and capable because, I did, through love and observation, I did believe those things about him. And at the time, it seemed he believed very much in my strengths and, it seemed really great, very supportive. But, over time, what inevitably happens in an abusive relationship is the abuser starts to demand more. Which, again, if you're a normal human with used to normal relationships, everybody knows there are points when we love people in our lives and the people need more of your energy than maybe what had been established before. Like they're going through a really tough time. They really need you there. And because you guys are close, because you have a bond, because you love them, of course you're going to give them that, knowing, hypothetically that if you end up in a similar situation, they'll be there. They'll, be there in the ways that they can through their love languages, through their energies, through how you've kind of established things. And I understand that some people may have grown up where they sort of got used to conditioned sort of one-sided relationships, I guess we'd call them. Relationships where it was completely regular, even though it was not supposed to be, to kind of have somebody demand more from you. Like if you had been taught your whole life, be strong, be resilient, be a provider, be somebody who can be relied upon, but you were not also taught, have firm boundaries. Your feelings and thoughts matter too. Make sure that you are given love as well. That could be a problem. I grew up in a kind of very conservative environment, and that conservative thinking definitely focuses on individuals being resilient and being strong and kind of being a part of a more traditional structure, often a Christian structure of this is your role in the community and this is how you fall into the community. And I do not want to go into the politics or the cultural attitudes persons may have against that because, trust me, I've already done the ups and downs and lefts and rights of my political and spiritual upbringing. I more just want to focus on kind of the general attitude of that. And while I do believe this attitude is very positive in some regards, I think it's very important to instill in individuals certain principles, certain understandings that they are not the forefront and center of the universe, that they are here to serve others and for others to also kind of support them. The secondary argument, though, others supporting them, can sometimes get lost in the wake. And in fact, this could be maybe an issue in Christianity or an issue in some gender politics, because women are especially taught this, to be submissive, to be supportive, to be here for men, for others, and beyond religion. That's just kind of how a lot of Western culture has evolved, where women are given that kind of secondary role. And as a result, you see abusive behavior far more likely in a kind of male-female scenario where the man has all the control and the female is kind of, just trying to keep her head above water through it. And, of course, I'm not saying it cannot happen the other way around. Of course it can. Any situation where a person is programmed or is conditioned to assume a lot of the blame, a lot of the responsibility, and not ask for, or there not being space for them receiving what they need, that the gender is irrelevant. This just happens. And then it's just a matter of how bad the treatment gets on the other side. And what you have to do as an individual, who needs to own her or his own responsibility for these things and make sure that you heal from them. And my whole kind of dive into this was kind of dealing with the conservative individuality, things being one-sided, and how that shaped me. But really I was more focusing on how, over time, the abuse came out. At first it seemed completely natural and normal. Hey, he just needs a little more support right now. Hey, this is the first time he's ever left his parents' house. This is the first time, he's just graduating college. Man, he's going through a lot. I am so used to kind of being self-reliant and just hacking away at it. I have no problem, making sure that his needs are being provided. I'm sure my turn will come. And the irony is that phrase, I'm sure my turn will come, could literally define my whole relationship, because waiting for my turn was such a fruitless endeavor. It never happened. There would be so many situations where he's like, just do this one thing and then you'll get your quote unquote turn. And, me naively, you could say, and many other mean words, just kept doing it, waiting for my turn. And, love should be given freely. It shouldn't be given with conditions. And anybody who gets in a toxic relationship, or in my case, a very abusive one, it's not, your behaviors are not going to make you feel proud of yourself in the end. And a lot of abuse survivors struggle with that, because we want to be in some ways angelic. We want to have this kind of beautiful, perfect, on paper victimhood, so that if people interrogate us, because they will, if people accuse us, because they will, if people refuse to believe us, because they won't, when these things happen, we'll feel like just this absolute resolve, because we were angelic. Unfortunately, that is impossible. You cannot be angelic and perfect when you are fighting for your life in many scenarios, and when you are fighting just to remove yourself from what can be years and years and years of psychological conditioning, and conditioning that was very subversive at first and insidious, and then built up over time. Like, what is it, the frog in the boiling pot of water, and the water just incrementally it's hotter and hotter until the frog doesn't know that she's being boiled alive. It's the same principle. And although, to be honest about myself, physical violence was incorporated into my relationship fairly early. And so one could definitely look at me and go, well, you weren't even that trauma bonded by that point. You could have left at that point. And you know what, I did. And that's something I need to examine in my own childhood and my own experience, as to why I agreed to let him back into my life after he showed very, very clear signs of physical endangerment, like angry and aggressive endangerments. That one could say it's because I had some of that experience when I was very young, and so it seemed normal. I was, in some ways, felt like, well, that's just how men are, which I know is not true, but, there was a part of me that was just like, well, men have anger problems, and and just kind of giving that a pass. And that's my own journey and something I have to examine for myself. We all have our moments where we probably saw the red flag, and for whatever reason, we didn't walk away as firmly as we should have. And again, this always goes back to the whole try to go easy on yourself thing. Don't blame the victim, because, things are very complicated in any relationship. And especially when we're young, or it's a bad economy, or there's all sorts of factors that go into things. So many factors can go into things. It's just not fair to go to the victim and be like, well, that was your point. That was your moment. Why didn't you take it? This is clearly on you. Because it's not. Everybody needs to stop that. It is so flabbergasting that a man or a woman can hit somebody, can rape somebody, can brutalize a person who is taking care of them, loving them, and the person that's being, just stepped on, sometimes quite literally, is the one that's being interrogated and looked down upon. And I don't know what that says about our society. I don't know what that means for all of us. I don't know. I could of course go into theories about all sorts of things about religion, politics, gender, tons of things. But I suppose in the end of the day, it's kind of irrelevant, because while we can always look to what we do, like for example with the abuser, when you say, oh, how could he have, how could she have? It's the same thing with these kind of societal issues. How could they? What happened here? What's the root here? All these things are fine to examine and study. But in the end, I really would rather us just find the solutions and work on a better future for ourselves. Because we can sit and marinate in the past. We can obsess over all the things that should have been done and all the things that happened. And I think that is necessary to kind of get a clearer picture so we can properly heal in the present and make good plans for the future. But our focus needs to be, for now and for always, not on them, they're gone now, but instead on us and what we need to do and how we are going to move forward. Because whether we intended it to or not, when we leave abuse, oftentimes we no longer feel a connection to us. Not in the way that I think regular folk do. Like, who we are, our attachment to us, it's shaken. And so we don't know what we want. We don't necessarily even want to trust ourselves or to help ourselves. Like we feel unworthy of that. Especially because a lot of us, since we did endure selfish behavior, we tended to go to the opposite extreme and become super unselfish to the point that that's actually become a problem. And any going back to being just a normal human, asking for normal, individual, self-focused things makes us feel uncomfortable, makes us feel like we are asking too much. And we aren't. What we're doing is we're establishing normal levels of individuality and a normalcy of just being a human again. And, once you start doing it, it really does feel good. The moment that you stop thinking completely and totally about others that's around you. And I know this can be hard if you have children, of course. I don't have children. I can focus a little more just on my individual rights. But once we stop doing that, stop focusing on our friends, on our family, on everybody else, and instead take the time to just sit with us and sit down, bend the knee, look at ourselves in our metaphorical faces and say, okay, what do you want? And, I think the first step towards healing is asking that question. What do you want? And after all this talk, I think it's time for me to kind of dive into today's topic. I grabbed a bubbly sparkling water, so you're going to hear a little sound as I grab this. I'm a little thirsty, and I love my sparkling waters. This one is a lime flavored sparkling water. I like all of theirs. I think it's really good quality. Today we're going to talk about the importance of purpose and establishing goals. And I know that some of us, we have pretty full schedules. COVID has definitely changed everything for a lot of us. I actually have a lot of free time in a way that I never thought I would. I had all these plans, pre-COVID last year, and COVID kind of, stopped all that like it did for many of us. And, I think it's been interesting because societally we've definitely had to all go through a bit of some introspection, so to speak, as we've all dealt with this global pandemic, which has claimed many, many, many lives. But as we've sat here, hopefully some of us have thought about purpose. And I think purpose will quite literally, I believe, give us such a focus and a strength that we can rise above addictions, bad habits, bad relationships. So many things can be cured if we come up with a solidified, focused purpose. And this purpose can be something small or something very, very large. I know I live downtown, and because I live downtown, I meet a lot of persons who are, I'll go ahead and call them kind of Scenesters. They're people who are very social and dress in very interesting clothes and are kind of known for being very popular and celebrated around town. A lot of them are in the arts, are in the service industries and things like that. And I kind of bring them up because there inevitably comes a point when, they've developed these beautiful, unique personalities. They've learned so much through this world, how to be very charismatic, very socially adaptive, very stylish, tons of really interesting, quirky, fun, how to network, how to be good at jobs. I mean, doing it is very advantageous for them. I think it really helps kind of develop you into a very three-dimensional person, doing the kind of living in that world and existing in that world. But of course, there are problems in that world as well. Whenever you are focused on something that's a little more socially oriented and about status or popularity, there's going to be things like drugs. There's going to be, odd hours. A lot of unconventional things and lifestyles. And, this is fine and good, and I'm not casting judgment, but it can be hard when you find yourself, say, in your 30s, or you find yourself, no longer wanting to kind of be in this sort of Vanity Fair situation, because there's not a lot of longevity to it. It's a great spot to learn lessons and to have fun and to really find out who you are. It's not so much a good spot if you want to have a stable 401k oriented kind of future. And inevitably that point hits with a lot of these people. And they either find a way to sort of work with it, or they don't, and then they sort of become I'm kind of giving you a weird peek into my world. My roommate refers to, for example, some of them, they're called the Lost Boys. And, when you live downtown, the Lost Boys are, I don't know if I should say this, often it's referred to as the men who are sort of in their, 40s or things, who have sort of not invested in anything beyond the music venues and the bars of an area, and you just see them out every night, kind of smoking the same American spirits and drinking the same kind of craft beers, and kind of they just are referred to as the Lost Boys because they've no longer really take risks. They're stuck in the same pattern. And this is my world. There are other worlds where people end up getting married, say at 24, and they have their first kid, and, they go into some data entry job, and, where mostly you sit in a cubicle or at a desk, and it's good benefits, and then, you have your house, and then there's also that kind of, everything's a routine now, and everything feels the same, and you're kind of just stuck, And it happens with anybody and anything where you stop trying to evolve and grow, and you feel like you're kind of in a hole, in a well, and you're screaming up, and all you hear are just kind of like the echoes. You can't get out. You can't really, it just seems so far away. And the best way to fix that is through a purpose. And again, I have a few purposes, and these things, they have to be real. I mean, you have to create in your mind, this is it. And like for me, a purpose I have, I kind of sprained my ankle 2 days ago, so I'm sort of a little laid up right now, trying to wait for my ankle to feel a little better. But as soon as it does, I'm going to go to a bike shop, and I plan on purchasing an e-bike, which is an electric bike. This is a big purpose that I created for myself. After the abuse, my body was just absolutely wrecked. I had no energy. My lower back was just screaming. I had health problems, and I knew, and then COVID happened, so I knew something had to change and something needed to change. My purpose for my health became, I had to think of something. And some people might go and get a gym membership, or some people might do those things and then never use it or never commit to it. My theory behind that is because it's not something that really excites them. You need to find something that excites you. Everybody has an activity that they loved when they were a child or that appeals to them. And it doesn't have to be, I think, this high, intense energy thing. I don't know why so many people are kind of junkies for pain. And they're just like, oh, your self-care doesn't work unless there's pain involved, and it's unless you work out your body so hard that like the muscles are torn and you're sore and you can barely move around for 2 days. That's how you know that you're making progress. And I'm like, is it? Okay. I would say that when we want to make a change, like say a health change, we need to sit and establish what works for us and take it gently. I don't understand. There's a lot of times I feel like there's almost an urgency that a lot of people have. Like they say to themselves, okay, I envision myself healthier and more active. And they just sort of have this urgency. It's like it has to happen in 2 weeks or I'm a failure. I'm like, what? 2 weeks? I mean, when we think about how long a time it took for us to get sort of to, let's say, the negative state we are in, like, laying on the couch or not being active. If we think about how long that took, and usually it started with one bad habit and then 2 bad habits and then 3, and then the depression hit and then things occurred, and now here we are. That took a while to, I'm sure, hit that point. So it's going to take a while for you to be at this envisioned situation that you may see in the future. It'll take a very long while, I imagine, if you've not been using your body to, say, get on a bicycle and bike for 20 miles. That could take a while to build up that stamina. At least I know it would for me. I would not do well for 20 miles of cycling, but one day I very well could. And so to go back to me and what I'm doing, I'm purchasing an e-bike. And, that is a huge purpose for me. E-bikes are wonderful because you can take an e-bike and you can rely on the electric motor to sort of, if it's just too much to go up the hill, just too much muscle, you don't have enough muscles for it, your e-bike can do it for you. But then say you really want to exercise, you really want to push yourself further, you can turn off that e-bike and then you're riding it like a regular bike. And it gives you both options to where you can feel the mobility, the momentum, you can feel good, you can have the wind in your face, you're on a bike again. If you're with other people who are more athletic, you don't feel as self-conscious, you're not going to have to worry about, falling behind and being made fun of, or feeling ashamed of it. With an e-bike, you have that cheat code, so to speak. And over time, you can build up as need be until you may not even ever rely on the electric part. And so I really liked the idea and the appeal of the e-bike for me. I love cycling. There's a lot of nice roads and trails in my area for cycling. It's become a very popular thing, I think. in this, like the last 10 years. And so that's something I've used to kind of build a purpose as far as health is concerned. But building a purpose beyond that is also equally important. If something is not working in your life, if you are feeling like you are stuck, you have to first ask yourself, well, what is it that I want? Like, because sometimes when we are just perpetually dissatisfied, it may be nothing. We may just be dissatisfied because we're not practicing gratefulness. And all of this can just simply be solved by practicing gratefulness. By, instead of being so focused on what you don't have or what you wish you have, you're not taking even a moment to breathe in all this great, wonderful, glorious beauty around you. And there usually is so much. People who are ungrateful are never going to be happy. Gratefulness is usually the first step towards happiness. And also, when you feel ungrateful all the time, it's a lot harder for you to feel motivated to pursue something else in your life, to pursue something that's going to give you joy or that's going to help you grow. Because growth should always be our focus. And, you know, when we're with an abusive person, abusers don't grow. They never grow. They stay the same. By the way, I am watering my plants while I talk to you. Abusers stay the same. And there's not really any growth other than they become more abusive. But as far as any self-improvement is concerned, that's not even going to be an agenda for them. Why would they change? Most of them already feel they're perfect. Well, we unfortunately, or very fortunately, often do not feel that way. There's always room for growth and change within ourselves. And after leaving abuse, I have to tell you, it has been so wonderful to have the space to self-examine and to finally be able to sit with myself in a way I couldn't before. You know, I had to flee everything. Everything I knew I had to run away from. If I hadn't have, I probably would be dead. That's not an exaggeration. And of course, as is typical in these rather dramatic scenes, I don't think many people would have believed such a thing was possible by this person if it wasn't for, if I hadn't have died, ironically. It's one of those things, like they wouldn't believe it until she's dead. And I really didn't feel like dying just to prove a point that I really didn't even care to prove to people. What does it matter if you believe what's happening to me or not? It's really irrelevant. My happiness is what's important. And, you know, having now explained a little bit what the world, at least of some of my friends, are in, you can imagine status and persons who really prioritize the opinions of others and their public images, how that can become very toxic in your life after a while. I was around a lot of people, and I wasn't ever really able to really express how I felt, or even if I liked or disliked somebody, because of the abuser and just because of my life and where I was at. So now I get this beautiful opportunity to just be alone, which I know for some people is scary, but is actually quite wonderful, to just really be alone with myself and get to know myself and get to figure out, okay, what's going on here? What's your purpose here? What do you want here? And I do think there's a choice in what we want, and this needs to be really, I think, emphasized for people. We choose whether we're going to be good or whether we're going to be bad. And I know some people will philosophically say, well, what even is good? What even is bad? And I'd rather not go into the incredible gray, loop-de-loop-de area of philosophical pondery about good and evil. Instead, I will say, you determine what your focus is going to be. And I really wanted to focus on helping others, being present and there for people without taking any of my energy away. Like, I had really drained myself a lot codependently and unhealthily trying to help others. And I wasn't doing it right. I was giving way too much, or I was giving with ulterior motives, and it didn't lead to anywhere I felt good. And also there was this really unhappy moment where I realized that while my main focus in life was to, believe it or not, be very supportive of others and help others, other people not so much. And it was like I felt obligated to help persons who were more interested in drama or in just having a good story to tell, regardless of the feelings of those involved in that story. And like that person, of course, if like she was in need or having an emotionally an unpleasant day, I would of course go to her and comfort her and listen to her and try to be there for her, even though, in a different scenario, it wouldn't even occur to her to do that for me. In fact, if I had said to her, wow, I'm having struggles with my marriage, and I told her some of the things, she wouldn't try to help me, but she would take that information and disseminate it with her own spin. And we've all met those people. And the only reason I'm using that as an example, not to be like, oh, those gossip queens, how dare they, but it's more to just illustrate that when we don't have a good, strong sense of who we are, and if we do want to go out there and be good and kind people, we also need to understand that not everybody's our friend, and that not everybody is going to reciprocate that. And you at all points have a choice between whether you give that energy or you don't give that energy. And there can be a moment that you become, because so many victims of abuse often talk about kind of being more on the empathetic scale. And empathy is a very difficult skill to master. It's a very difficult skill to master. It's often why we end up codependent, because it's a lot to be so open to people's feelings. I also think it's the greatest path towards self-awareness and enlightenment. So I think empathy in my mind is love, and it is love in its purest form. And so to be good at empathy is to be good at love, which I also think is to be closer to God, because God is love. And so if you want to become more loving and more empathetic, you also need to understand how to create good boundaries. And just because you say no, it doesn't mean that you're being bad. In fact, that gossip queen I refer to, if I had been strong in myself at that point and able to kind of feel good about who I am and know that she's not the kind of person I should go to if, say, I'm having a marital struggle. Say my abuser had just gotten done, beating me or raping me, and now I'm at this diner and I'm having a hard day, and it's really heavy it's heavy on my mind, but of course I can't just tell anybody what has happened. And she comes up, and of course she is not the kind of person to share that with. Absolutely not. And but that doesn't mean, however, that you cannot be present for that person. Like, you can still listen, and you can still love, and you can still do all the things that basically they're asking you for, but you do not need to open yourself up to them in the sense that you're going to feel disappointed, resentful. You're going to feel exhausted by them because you don't know how to not feel the feelings that they're feeling. Like if they talk about just some people really are just constant drama and constant chaos, and you meet them in their lives and the chaos just is always swirling, and that doesn't mean that they're not unhappy or the chaos isn't relevant. But if you don't know how to put boundaries and barriers up for that, you're going to be perpetually anxious and perpetually depressed and perpetually on edge around them. How can you not? And that's, of course, going to be why you need to start to establish a stronger sense of who you are and a stronger purpose to who you are. And to go into purpose, you can't have purpose until you know who you are. So once you've done that, once you've said, this is what I want, this is who I want to be, then you need to get on it. And that means, well, if I know who I am, what is going to make me happier? What's going to be more in tune with my life journey here on this earth? Because we only get one go at it, as far as we know, at least as this rendition of who we are. So what do I want to do on this earth? And it might take 2 years. Say you're like, I have lived well, I can use me again. I have lived in an area for a long time where there's a lot of thinking that doesn't align with my thinking, and where there's a lot of people who, don't have the same values I do. And while I love the landscapes, maybe I don't really love that. And I've always heard that this other area in the country is gorgeous, and this other area is more in alignment with that. And I've really wanted to travel, and I've really wanted to move, and I wanted to push myself to do that. Okay, how do you achieve that? Maybe it's not true, maybe it is. A first thing you'd have to do is travel there. So you'd have to come up with a time to travel. We're going to make this place, we're going to say it's Missoula, Montana. You're going to now have to find a time to travel to Missoula, Montana. And you're going to figure out what the cost would be. You're going to figure out a good time to go. And so many people will get caught up in, oh, what if you have to go by yourself? So going by yourself can sometimes be the best thing you can ever do. Even if you're a woman, I know women have to worry more about their safety. But even so, you can go, you have to make goals to get there. I want to move. I feel like there's a calling to Missoula, Montana. Okay, the cost for a plane ticket is going to be $600, and then there's going to be room and board. I need to save $2,000 to really make sure that I have enough, and then I have to, of course, take off work and all those things that are just logistically needed. But you'll do all that, and you'll do all that relatively easily if the purpose is driving you strong enough. If you have, it's like, you know what, I have been sitting for years and years and years and years with this uncomfortable knowledge that this area is not in keeping with my soul, that I feel it is calling to me to go somewhere else, somewhere where people have this value, or where there's just this kind of energy, and this energy is not the energy I want. And you have to really sit with it and put it inside of you, because then once it's really there and it's unshakable, going to Missoula is going to be easy. It's going to be just easy to do it because you've already convinced yourself of all the reasons to do it. And you're no longer telling yourself, well, maybe there's some good and there's some bad and there's some in between. Finding resolve is so essential. And I know, again, for persons recovering from abuse, you're gaslit a lot. Like, one of the things they do is make you feel like you can't be resolved about anything because you're so confused about what you even want and need, because he or she keeps telling you that you want the opposite. Like, they keep you in a constant state of confusion and self-criticism. Well, you can still be a self-reflective person. Everybody should be self-reflective. But when self-criticism becomes poisonous and prevents you from doing what needs to be done to help improve your life, it needs to be muted a bit. It needs to be pulled back a bit. And sometimes just telling that voice that's always looking for some new angle of contention, some new argument, some new loop-de-loop-de-loo, but maybe have you considered perhaps, but what if? Sometimes it's good to mute that and to really stick true to your feelings. And usually when you have that feeling of contentment, if this is right, if this feels good, don't try to neuter it. Don't try to make it go away. Don't try to confuse it. Go with that feeling and sit with it, and then use it to drive the purpose. And when you feel in your heart, Missoula, Montana, just quiet the other voices. Just quiet them and be like, you know what, I'm going to do this. And also realize that maybe if you went to Missoula and it turned out to be really muddy and nasty and a person spit on you and it was just awful and you just, were shocked by how unhappy it made you, that's okay too. All of it's totally fine. This isn't about helplessness. This isn't about being in a future faking mindset or a fantasy mode all the time. This is about being excited for your life and dreaming of possibilities and believing in yourself that you can achieve those possibilities, because you can. Anybody can. And you just have to really want to and feel confident in yourself to do it. And that's a huge purpose too. A lot of us struggle with our confidence levels after what has happened to us. We don't feel confident to do anything. My ex was so critical all the time when he would tell me I was doing everything wrong. There was never a moment anything was right in the end. Any love gesture, anything was going to be met with scorn, criticism, demands, and horrific abuse, and a lot of alcoholism. And, again, this was be much later. This is 10 years in the making with him. And, as a result, my confidence got pretty low. My confidence, which ironically enough, when I got in that relationship, people knew me for my confidence. They would always tell me things like, I love that you seem so focused and that you know what you want. And, it kind of goes back to what abusers take away from you. But what they take away from you is, in some ways, temporary. And I want you to hold on to what drew them to you to begin with, because they don't ever attack persons who are weak or small. That is another complete misconception. They go after people who are strong and who have great, great values and virtues and things going on for them. And so, and when you get out, at first it's really painful because you feel very hopeless and very scared. But afterwards, when you start to get back those things that they kind of criticized and tried to beat out of you, like, say, your confidence, it feels wonderful. It's like greeting an old friend. And putting a purpose in your life, like an e-bike or a trip to Missoula, Montana, is going to keep you focused on the future and not on the past. And if you want to recover and heal, having that future focus is so important. And I also kind of want to get witchy for a second, because I am a witchy person, and I really do believe this. Say you're sitting, it's been, we'll say, 4 months since you finally were able to escape, and you're, say, living somewhere else, or he's gone, or she's out of the picture. The point is you've had 4 months now, no contact. They are away from you, and you're starting to heal. And say you sit down at your coffee table and you light some sage because you want to cleanse the space and you want to really focus in on what you intend to do now. And you light a candle and you write down some things, and you put all your energy, all your intentions into it, and you say, you know what? I really want this. This is what I want. Now that I am free of this person that was poisoning me, this person that was hurting me, I'm free now, and this is what I want. And as you say, light an orange candle for manifestation, and write this down, and you say, I want a healthy relationship. I want a healthy relationship where it's reciprocal, where it's supportive, but I feel strong in myself, and she or he feels strong in me, and this relationship's going to do for me what it needs to. Or I want to travel. I want to go to Missoula, Montana. I want to smell the pines, the wild earth out there, see the mountains. I want to experience new kinds of people and know that, this situation I was in was so small in the grand scheme of everything else out there. And then as you do that and say, I want to manifest it, manifest it, manifest it, what you need to understand is you have to get out there for it to manifest. You can't expect the universe to drop, like an Animal Farm or something, a man out of the ceiling and just drop him in your lap, or a woman. That's very unlikely to happen. I'm pretty sure Leonardo DiCaprio's car is not going to break down on the side of the road, and he's not going to come knocking on your door and say, hey, could you come to my Hollywood, mansion, and, we'll figure it out from there. I don't think that's going to happen. And also, maybe don't try to manifest that from the universe, because I don't know. I mean, try. If it works, seriously, like, give me your number, because I want to know what you did. But the point is that you have to put the effort out there. To quote a Christian phrase, God helps those who help themselves. And that's not to say that God's not helping or the universe is not helping. I think a lot of people say, well, then magic doesn't exist or God doesn't exist. And again, I'm just of the mindset of, does it matter if it happened? But I believe that the universe is always giving you signs and always pushing for things to happen to you. A great book for those that want to kind of get into mindfulness is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, I think is how you pronounce his name. The Alchemist kind of delves into that a bit and talks about sort of how once you know what you want, the universe will do whatever it takes to kind of help you achieve that. And I do believe that. And even if you don't believe that, maybe you should believe that. Just do a thought experiment for maybe 2 or 3 weeks where you believe that the universe is sending you signs or sending you aid to get this thing. And because psychologically speaking, to go back to psychology, if you start to think about red cars, guess what's going to be noticed more as you're walking around on the street? Red cars. This is just a very obvious thing. It's much like why you should practice positive thinking. If you are going to be looking for jerks like your ex or your abuser, like, man, they're everywhere. All these narcissists are everywhere. Guess what you're going to start noticing and seeing? Yeah, they're going to be everywhere. They're going to be popping around like red cars. But if you focus instead on, say, something positive, something good, well, guess what? You're going to see that red car too. And it's not to say that the narcissist isn't out there or that blue cars aren't out there. It's basically just saying, tune your radio to what you want to hear and what you want to bring in. You don't have to sit with anything you don't want. And the universe is here to help you. And so basically, you want to go to Missoula? Awesome. And you want to manifest a wonderful life partner? Awesome. Get out there. Get on your e-bike. Purchase an e-bike, which can be expensive. Honestly, I hate to say it, don't go any less than $1,000, they typically say, because you really need a good quality e-bike. That's another day. So you're going to have to save some money, typically, for this. And, get an e-bike. Get out there. Do some volunteer work. I know with COVID, I was actually about to get involved with the Boys and Girls Club. I was about to do some hospice volunteering. I had everything just lined up. I was on my way to self-care bliss when COVID hit. And so I've had to make some pivots like the rest of us have. But so it might be a little harder to do some of the volunteer works, but you can always find new things. Bird watching has been a big one. Get some binoculars and your e-bike and go bird watching. There's a lot you can do. You don't need other people either to do it. And I know that makes people sometimes feel very lonely and uncomfortable. But if you want to hear some harsh truth, when you were with your abuser, because I know when you were with your abuser, you were alone that whole time. You were lonely that whole time. It didn't matter if she or he was standing next to you. It didn't matter in the slightest. You were alone. And once you realize that, maybe doing these things solo at first isn't a big deal. Because oftentimes we will compromise with toxic relationships because we don't want to be alone. We'll end up hanging out with persons who are really vapid or really self-indulgent or a lot of negative traits that just drain you, that don't make you feel very loved. And we'll keep existing in them because maybe they're popular or maybe they bring something to the table that you feel you lack. But honestly, doing it alone, if it means you're going to have a more fulfilled and spiritual day, it's preferable. And it's not going to make you a loser. It won't make you abnormal. I think that we as a society probably needs to feel less that way. I think that there's a lot of stigma associated with doing things solo. And I know, again, as women, I'm a woman, obviously. If you didn't catch my voice, I identify as female. Women, we do have a problem in that it is dangerous. A lot of us are socialized and conditioned at very young ages that we cannot do things by ourselves for good reason, very good reason. Even going into a parking garage by ourselves can be a very scary affair. And so that is a real issue we have to go through. And some women compromise with it by carrying mace or by getting big dogs We all have our methods, and every one of us has our stories. So for the men listening in, hashtag Me Too babies, let's do better. Let's really fight for a safer community and environment for women. But I'd rather not go into all the tangent of what we can do to be safe before we venture out. I still think even as women, we can do things by ourselves with limited risk to our health or safety. It could be as simple as carrying mace or having a big dog. I have my friend, she has a wonderful gray dog. His name is Suede, total sweetheart. But since getting him, it's been a lot easier for her to do things solo. And she's a very lovely, very beautiful woman. So I also kind of want to destigmatize the only weird, strange-looking people do things by themselves. That's not true in the slightest. I mean, one could argue she's a little weird. Actually, I could definitely argue that, but that's a little mean. I would say she's quirky. But one of the first steps you need in order to heal, I think, is to stop caring so much what other people think. In fact, the more you stop caring about that, the better you're probably going to feel, because you've got nothing to prove to anyone. Nothing. And if your focus and aim is to grow and be a good person and be a supportive and loving person, you don't have to worry about what other people think of that. You already know what your values are. You know that you're not going to become like your abuser. I know a lot of us worry we're going to be like our abuser. You don't have to worry about that. It again comes down to trusting yourself. And the irony is that while we usually go into mental gymnastics, trying to figure out if what we did was a good thing, if it was a helpful thing, if it was a kind thing, if it was a selfish thing, our abusers usually don't think about any of those things. They're very unconscious people, usually, and they don't self-examine. Whenever you've probably done this, you've attempted to tell this person, hey, this was awful, you did this thing. How did they respond? I'll tell you how they probably responded. They said, no, I didn't, you did that. Or, I only did that because you were doing this. All they can do is deflect it. That's just abuse 101. And it's horrific when they do really bad things. Like with me, the sexual assault was, awful, horrible things were happening. And he did your classic abuser response, and that would be, it didn't happen. And if you insist, say I really pushed through and said, it did happen, here are the bruises, here's the evidence. Well, if it happened, it wasn't a big deal. And then I'm thinking, okay, maybe it wasn't a big deal. Maybe, really, he just needed that. And maybe I should be more accommodating. It's my duty. I maybe see it more as a duty. If I could just, it does help him sleep better. It does help him feel good. Maybe I should stop, fighting this. Okay. And then but maybe I see past that and I say, but still, this is my body. You're hurting me. This isn't okay. Well, then the next one would be, if it did happen and it was a big deal, then it must have been your fault. And I'm only bringing up and then it must have been your fault thing because this will always be how they respond. There's never going to be a stopping of that. Because these people are unconscious, these people are selfish, they're not going to change, they're never going to change. It doesn't matter even how much therapy you throw at it, it's not going to happen. The best thing you can do, or maybe they can change, the point is it's irrelevant, I don't want to say they could never change, but they can't change for you, and that needs to be emphasized. So many people will stay because they think there might be a 0.1% chance they'll get better. Irrelevant, just irrelevant. The point is they don't reflect. You do. And so while you might feel uncomfortable not caring so much what other people think, if you start to, well, as my roommate calls it, put my hater blockers on, got my hater blockers on, got my hater blockers on, when you start to move forward and kind of put those blinders up and be like, no, I am not allowing my maybe well-meaning aunt to come in and give me advice that's contrary to my focus and my purpose. Or I'm not going to let that staring couple affect me because they're seeing me look at birds by myself. Just getting to the point where you're less sensitive to others, the exterior, because you are focused on your interior world and what you are creating for yourself and what's going to make you happy. You don't need the approval or thoughts of anyone else, because I'm sure you're smart, and I'm sure that you have a very strong personality, a strong spirit to you. There's nothing that a lot of those strangers or persons in your life can really actually teach you, I think, that you don't already know to some respect. By this point, you're an adult. By this point, this is really about figuring yourself out, and nobody can tell you who you are. Not a single person on earth can ever tell you who you are. Only you know who you are. And discovering that is what's going to give you the drive and focus to move forward, to find the soulmate, to move to Missoula, to do what needs to be done as you get on your e-bike. Anyway, I hope this was a fun podcast. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you feel a stronger sense of purpose and that you can establish some goals in your life to do what you want and that it feels maybe more attainable. Go out and live life and thrive. I love you so much, and have a great day.